Hey everyone, welcome back to the Trendcrusher podcast. I'm Peter K. As you've seen from the title and description of this episode, Tom Fountainhead is back on the podcast. We had an extensive chat around all things Changeling. The debut album is out this weekend via Seasons of Mist. Link is always in the show notes. Before we get into the chat, if you enjoy metal and hearing about musicians from across the world, hit subscribe or follow on the podcast platform that you're listening to this episode on. Share it with a friend. Leave me a rating if you're listening to it on Spotify. Like, share, subscribe if you're listening to this on YouTube. With all of that out of the way, here's my chat with Tom. Hi, Tom. Welcome back to the podcast.
Peter, good to see you. Good to hear you again.
Yeah, and the last time we spoke was a little over a year ago in June 2023 when you were actually in the same country as me, India, and so much has changed since then.
It's been a roller coaster since then, non-stop roller coaster. I was in a roller coaster back when we last spoke, and the roller coaster hasn't stopped since then. So here we are.
But one thing I must say, right, is, and I don't really realize it was a scoop or an exclusive of sorts, but I realized that was one of the first times you kind of spoke about Changeling and Changeling, should I say it. And now, over a year and a half later, we've got a release date, and you're also doing press around the album. How does it feel?
Oh, it's a whole thing. I can't even tell you how exactly it feels because I don't have the luxury right now to sit back and look at it and see and check in with myself about how I feel about it. So I couldn't tell you that it's such a relief because I haven't stopped working on it and for it at any time since we spoke about it. And we can get into why that is, of course, if you like. But I don't think I will be having the opportunity to even sit back and enjoy and tell myself, hey, it's done, it's out, until it actually physically releases. And that's going to be on April 25th. And then the Atmos mix comes out mid-May, and we're probably going to be working on that one until the actual physical release day of the album. So it's like, we're talking May by this point until I can actually say, oh, hey, there's this thing that I started 5 years ago and now it's done, because it really doesn't feel done at all.
Okay, so I definitely want to dive in more on the technology and bit because I clearly remember you talking about it. So hold on.
I do remember us talking about this. Yes.
Yeah. So we'll definitely catch up on that in a bit. But I wanted to go back to at least the beginnings, right? Because you can actually now talk about it. So I had no idea what Changeling is, so I had to kind of look it up. And for those who don't know, it's, and I quote, a child believed to be secretly substituted by fairies for the parents' real child in infancy. And I was like, okay, this is interesting. But
wow, that is actually the first time I'm hearing this definition.
Okay. But what I was curious about, other than that, was for the longest time I knew you as Fountainhead, right? Because that's what you were releasing music under. So why shift from Fountainhead to Changeling?
In one word, marketing. So the slightly longer version is that I had been sitting on this album for over a year and trying to get it signed and trying to get a proper worldwide release with physical vinyl, everything, all these different things that had not been possible for me as I was working completely independent the last couple of years. And so then when Season of Mist came into the picture and signed the album and me, they were basically saying, listen, we're going to release it as you wish. So if you want to use Fountainhead, that's cool. But if we look at what's going on online, and if we look at how many Fountainheads there are just on Spotify on these different platforms, we highly suggest from a marketing point of view to find a new name for this project so we can have an easier time marketing it. And then basically we made an agreement that I will take their advice and we will still find ways to market it as my project so that the people who know who I am will be able, hopefully, to connect it to my past work in some way. So that was the agreement that we made. And that's why it is not a Fountainhead record on the cover, even though it is, obviously.
Yeah, I mean, I think I can, since I thankfully got a preview copy of the album, and thanks for sharing it. There is that trademark kind of sound that you're known for, right? The fretless leads and stuff like that. So that's intact, I must say. But before we kind of get into the music also, I was very curious about the fact that it's a concept album. That's what the press note said. Is there something you would like to reveal about this? Or because again, I had an access to the lyrics, so I was kind of skimming through them and going through them. What would you like to share at least about the concept so far?
Okay, I'll try to make this short because I've been talking about this in a few other interviews and I've always went on long tangents exploring the concept. So I'll try to keep it to a minimum. There's musical and lyrical concepts going on at the same time, in parallel but independent of each other. So musically, it's a journey from the past of extreme metal or technical death metal, progressive death metal to be specific, into the future. So it has 4 chapters, as you've probably seen, which really neatly correlates to the vinyl version, because then we have 1 chapter for 1 vinyl side, which, as the child of a vinyl record shop owner, is very important for me. So that makes me happy. And in the first chapter, we start with the history of the genre. So we are referencing old ideas and old sounds and old influences. And we are also deliberately referencing my own past work. That's why the single that just came out, Falling in Circles, that's one of the first songs on the album. And that's why that is basically saying, hey, look, here's all the different elements from Obscura Acroasis that you were a part of. So here's that again. That's not for lack of ideas, but that's because it's part of the concept to check all those boxes in the first chapter. And that's why we also have these guest solos, because it's all from people not only who I like and admire, but also who have played in my top 3 influences in the genre, which is Death, Cynic, and Morbid Angel. So then we move on to chapter 2, where we take the death metal sound, the progressive death metal framework, and then things get more adventurous. And we have different structures, different forms of orchestration, things that nobody's really done in this capacity before, but it's still very much like that style. You can put the needle on any of the songs in chapter 2 and be like, yep, that's death metal, that's progressive death metal. And then as we go into chapter 3 and 4, I don't want to spoiler too much because that's only going to be available to people once the album actually releases as a whole. But those are things and compositions that try to push the genre into completely new territory with lots of different ways of doing that. So that's the main musical concept. There's like smaller concepts about having the same core band on every track, but then the orchestration and the type of orchestration and the orchestration methods changes from song to song. And a couple of other things like trying to mix fretless and fretted guitar in ways that nobody has ever tried before to keep myself entertained and busy on that front as well. And then lyrically, it's a very loose story from the first person about somebody experiencing a very intense psychedelic trip. And this psychedelic trip has all these different phases, and the different songs correlate lyrically to the different phases: euphoria, paranoia, you know, delusions of grandeur. These different things all come up, and the trip flip flops between the positive and the negative one. And that also adds to the difference in tone and feel between the songs. And then it basically becomes a journey that goes deeper and deeper and deeper into the layers of the main protagonist's unconscious mind until he reaches the furthest point and then comes back up at some point with new insights, new information, and a new outlook on life. And then basically the last song, Anathema, is Florian, who wrote the lyrics and sang lead vocals on the album. That's his manifesto for the things that he learned and how he sees a lot of things, and it's really beautiful. So that's, in short, those are the concepts.
Wow. I mean, you kind of already answered the next question I had for you, which was how do you pick the guests and which song? But my God, I mean, like when I'm looking at the list of the guest musicians, right? Uh, just from an outreach perspective, it blows my mind that the fact that you got so many people. So I'm going to flip the question around to you because you actually revealed in our last chat who the core band for this album is. Uh,
Yeah.
what was something that kind of united all of you, right? I mean, when you look at Aaron, Florian, you already have spoken about Mike Heller. I mean, like, fuck, what a drummer. And he's played on like so many different great albums, right? Over the years. And we're not talking like a single decade or so, multiple decades. Everyone's kind of been really top musicians. What was one thing that you realized that, hey, this is going to be the core for the album?
That's a good question. The answer is very unspectacular. Those are all people that I knew and have had ties with before in some way, except for Aaron, who was the wild card, as I say, and a very, very good decision to go for that wild card. But it was, look, sometimes, I like, as you just heard, I like to dabble in big concepts and build little castles of musical you know complexity. But sometimes then also all the stuff is very simple and very personal in the way that I have made a lot of experiences in the music business that made me also distrustful of people in a lot of ways. And so I tend to like to invite people to work with me who I trust and have met in person, and I have known to share similar values in a lot of things. And that's, I think, probably true for a lot of people in the industry, that they would never go on YouTube and Google like who's the hot young guitar player. Let's have him on my album. It's like you reach out to the people that you know and that you relate to on a personal level. And so, for example, Florian and we've met in 2017, I think, and we have been aware of each other's work for far before that. And so we've been in correspondence for a long time, and we have been waiting both for an opportunity to work together for a long time. So it was not like I was thinking very long about who could I invite for this album. It was clear I'm going in this direction. I would love to work with Flo. Like that's if that happens, I'd be a happy man. And so fortunately, as it turns out, he also wanted this opportunity. So it wasn't like a very complicated, long process at all.
Okay, but now going back to the guest, because I'm
Yes.
very interested to know, since you said you kind of built this and you've got like paddles with music and stuff. I mean, when I'm looking at your guest musicians, that's pretty much everyone I want to invite on the podcast, right? So I'm sure there's like a wish list of sorts that you had. So take me
Right.
back, if you remember well. Who was the first musician you reached out to where you were like, fuck, yes, this is going to happen? And then it kind of fell in place as dominoes, or how was it?
I think it must have been Flo. Well, I don't know if it became clear from the material that you got from the promo team that it was actually Christian Münzner and I who started this project together.
Okay.
So technically the answer would be Christian Münzner because we initially started writing together and then we split into different directions and did different things. And from those sessions, I took the material and that became Changeling. So technically the answer would be Chris. And then once I decided that it was going to be a whole thing, I'm going to continue writing, I'm going to make it my own. Then Flo would probably be next, and then Mike. And Aaron came a little bit later into the fold. And then from the initial core band, so to speak, then when the music evolved and I was moving from the pre-production stage to the, finally production and finally mixing stage, then all those other guest musicians that was building up over years, like little bit by bit. So it wasn't at all clear who was going to play what, except for the main players when we started to record. Like, not at all.
Okay, fair enough. Now, one of the things I also realized when I was looking at the track links, right? Like you don't even have to start listening to the music, except I feel the interludes and say a couple of tracks. These are really lengthy tracks, right? So it's very clear this is not meant for, the TikTok, Instagram generation, right? This is music that you definitely want to listen to on your favorite headset or sound system, dive into it, tune out, so to say, right? I mean, that's how, at least over the last few days, I've been kind of enjoying this music, is kind of like immersing yourself into it. Do you think about how someone will end up listening to the music? Is that part of the process or at all?
That's a very good question, Peter. So first of all, I think the way that you've been engaging with it is perfect because it is very much a record to submerge yourself in, to really immerse yourself into the world of it. And I don't think that the songs would really speak to you if you didn't, which is a blessing and a curse. But it's not that deep really in the way that I may be a strategist and conceptualist with the things I write, but it doesn't go to the marketing level that I set out to write an album for a specific audience or, to be enjoyed in a specific thing. I just write music that I would want to enjoy myself. And then from that, all the different ideas and concepts come. Like, how could I do that? How could I? Because I'm a hard taskmaster. I've been, immersing myself in music pretty much every single day. And I just turned 41. So that's 30 years of like in-depth engagement with music. So it becomes harder and harder to satisfy myself with the things that I write. So, that's a really simple thing, I guess, that I'm just trying to write things that I find interesting. And also I try to go deeper and deeper into what makes me as a musician and as a composer, and to, just go at it with full confidence, because I was struggling with confidence for the longest time. And it's one of the missions I'm on, to really own who I am and what I can offer more and more with every project and every day, really. So I have for a long time figured out that I'm the best when I write in the long format. I don't struggle with the long format, I struggle with the shorter format. So it's only natural that if I do a big project like that, then the songs are going to be quite lengthy.
The first taste of Changeling we got was Abyss. And just like I said earlier, right, it's an 8-minute long song, which, if you think about it, is a bit unorthodox for not only, a first single, but also an introduction to an act project. Was that your first choice? And why did you decide that that would be the first song that people would hear from Changeling?
It really speaks for the cinematic conceptual side of the album. And I think it's a really good statement to make because it announces the sound world of the album, but it's full of surprises, and I think it caught pretty much everybody by surprise in what it actually delivered. And I like that idea. I don't like playing it safe. And I didn't want to come out with a song that's like, hey, we're doing this again. I wanted to come out with something that makes people go, oh, really? That's interesting. And there's lots of things on Abyss that only reveal themselves upon further listening, and that's something that's true for the whole album. So I guess if you want to like this album, Abyss is a good first indicator whether or not you're going to engage with it.
Awesome. I don't think there's a better introduction to the track. Here is Abyss.
threadbare nexus of vacuous war.
And that was Abyss. I've got Tom talking to me about his album Changeling. Now, we did touch upon, your evolution, so to say, from Fountainhead to Changeling. What would you say to those who are still like on the fence and wondering, what is this going to be like, right? And especially those who've been following you for over a decade as Fountainhead. What do you think is there different or what's similar?
Oh, such good questions. Nice one, Peter. Wow, I would say if you responded to any of the different things that I stand for as a musician and as a human being, basically, in the past, with this album, you're getting more of every aspect. You're getting a lot more of every aspect. So I think there should be something for everybody, even though it is clearly a death metal album at heart. So that may not necessarily appeal to people who liked Fear is the Enemy and Reverse Engineering. But I've made a point to bring together all the different, or most of the different aspects of what I do on this album and take every single one of them to the next level. And Lord knows if that's not enough to convince people, then nothing is. So what can I say? I invested 5 years of my life into this album, and it may not be for everybody, and that's totally okay. But I don't work to make other people happy. I work to deliver the best I can. And I think I delivered the best that I can on most aspects of that. And where I didn't deliver the best I can, I had to stop because otherwise it would have just run me into the ground. And I still want to be able to do other things in the future. So.
Wow. And when I think about it, right, putting 5 years into like any creative output, let alone music, is just like really some kind of perseverance and dedication, right? Let alone when you're playing technical death metal or metal of any sort, right? sorry, I had to.
It's true. It's not an album of realistic expectations, shall we say? But it's also, I don't care about realistic expectations. I care about art. I care about doing the best I can possibly do. That's always been that way. And I think Changeling, that maybe goes back to your last question. Changeling is very unapologetic itself, unapologetically itself. And I think that's personally something I think that we should strive for in this day and age, to make something where we go all in and where we make a statement and where we exhaust ourselves in the search for something. That sounds pretentious as fuck, but in the search of something greater. Something greater doesn't always need to be the saving humanity, but it also can mean to look for something that inspires people in the years to come, because you took what you can offer so far that like, this is for the people who respond to that, this will be a feast. And I like that idea, because I am still so indebted and so thankful to the people who inspired me, who provided these feasts that nourished my soul, basically, when I was a kid and teenager, and listened to these albums and just thought to myself, this is blowing my mind. This is taking me to another universe. This is, right now, I don't care what happens in the world. I only care about this world that I'm in right now, thanks to this album that I am enjoying and just really immersing myself in. And I want to provide that for people now, if I can.
Okay. I mean, I get where you're coming from, and this is just taking a kind of zoomed out look in general, right, towards creative and the arts, like we are discussing. Do you care about legacy? Is there something that at some point, because clearly, the fact that you have put in so much time, put in so much effort, do you want to look back, say 10, 20 years from now, back at this? Is that something that also factors into your mind?
Oh, 100%. 100%. Yeah.
And
it's...
No, go ahead. It's occurred to me that that's something that you're doing, right? I mean, like, you wouldn't put out in, just to go back to something that you said, if you aren't fully into it, you're going to run yourself to the ground. So clearly that, the longevity of the art also matters, right? Because at some point, you have only that much time, that much that you can do. And I think that the fact that you're doing that now, other than like, say, 5 years from now, when you can just put out something.
Yeah. So I think about this a lot. I think about legacy a lot. And it's not necessarily something that came with getting older. It's something I've always thought about. And I think as an artist, it's very helpful to think long term and to think about what you want to do, not just from a spur of the moment, what you feel like right now kind of place, but also what kind of artistic statement you want to make in the long run. What do you want to stand for? What are the values that you want to portray in your music and in the type of, I don't want to say content because I hate that word, but like all the things that you put out in the world. I think that's really important. And ever since I became a dad, by now also more than a decade ago, it's been on my mind all the time, because you have these living, breathing examples of what you put in there, not just literally, but figuratively. And you realize, like, if you fuck up, this will remain in your children. They will carry that. They will carry your mistakes, but they also carry your triumphs, and they will carry your values to a degree before they go on doing their own thing and doing something else with it. And that responsibility also fed back into what I do as a musician, I think. And I think responsibility is something that we also should take more seriously than ever before as artists. Yeah, I just want to add something to that, because I think I've been having quite a few discussions with friends and colleagues over the last months, and in weeks, because we all know that we are living in very interesting times, for better and worse. And there's influences in my life that would ask me to, would really like me to take political stances in my music. And I think there's different ways that you can put a positive mark on the world, and you can change things for the greater good if you try, than being political and being active on that front. Because I don't think anybody needs somebody like me to make political statements in their music. But what I can do, what I figured out a long time ago, is that I can captivate some people, not all people, but a few, with what I do, and enrich their experience by giving them something they can't get anywhere else. That's, you can, like, my music is easy to dislike for what it tries to do. But if you're open to it, I think then I'm able to give you something that you can't get anywhere else, and that can enrich people's lives and inspire them to do cool shit. And I think that is also of value. And if I can keep doing that long enough, I can hopefully give people energy and broaden perspective through music that then feeds into them being more in the world, maybe just 0.1111%. And I'm very happy with that. And I think I'm way more useful of use in doing that than I would be of use for making political statements in diluting what an album like this can do. Because at the end of the day, it's escapism, right? But also escapism can give you more than just taking your mind elsewhere. It can also expand your mind elsewhere. And that expansion you take hopefully back to the real world, and then make different decisions through your expanded mind, even if it's just a tiny little thing.
Wow, that's well put. I mean, like, going back to your part about legacy, right? And I think I can resonate with you on that front. I mean, I'm going to be a dad for close to 10 years. Blows my mind. But it's crazy how that kind of shifts your perspective in just how you look at, like, not only life overall, but like you also sometimes end up with existential questions like, what the fuck am I doing, right? And who the fuck am I doing all of this for? So I totally get where you're coming from on that front. But also on the political thing, I feel, and I think that's a bit of selfish nature, if I may call it that, of like listeners or in general, right? Because I don't think like every musician, it's like, I expect you to do this because I want you to do it. And then that doesn't become something that your music or your art, it becomes something that I want. And at this point, I think thanks to like streaming at any given point, I mean, like, let's be honest, if someone wants to listen to like death metal from the 80s, they don't have to like wait for tapes or CDs to be shipped. They can just go on Spotify and listen to that. Why do you care about like new music or stuff like that? And I'm pretty sure there are a lot of people who don't give a shit about like any current music, right? I mean, I feel like honestly, the podcast is something that helps me a lot. I can get to talk to new musicians, keep up with the latest release, right? Otherwise, let's be honest, there are like, I don't know, gazillion new artists, so much new music coming out every day. And this is like all parts of the world, right? I mean, like, look at us. We're sitting like halfway across the world, India, Germany, between like that. Although I feel there's not that many artists, metal, especially in India. But yeah, it's crazy when I think about it. But okay, this is the time where all the sound nerds, or I don't know, tech nerds and everyone has been waiting for, right? Talk to me about the Dolby Atmos mix of the album, because you're still working on it from what I can understand, right?
Yeah, I'm still working on it. You wanna hear something extremely nerdy and kind of crazy?
Tell me.
I started doing it And it's already such a crazy journey. And I love the fact so much that sometimes these little tiny things happen in your life, and then from this little seed of something, like it blows up, and then I tell you about something that I am really interested in, I want to do, and I'm going to do, even though I haven't done it. And here we are 1.5 years later, and now I'm doing it. So it's crazy how that evolves. And I'm doing it, and then in the process of doing it, I find out, wow, I have to go back and re-record the entire rhythm guitar of the entire album to make this Atmos mix work, because now I need to get all the rhythm guitars to be quad tracked for this. There's literally no other way to get what I want out of it, but I'm already so deep in it that it would be madness not to do it. So it's damned if you do, damned if you don't type scenario. And I just been in between the mixing sessions, I have been frantically working to basically record the album again.
Wow. So that's what the stories were. Because I was trying to figure through your Instagram stories. Like, I was like, wait, I thought this was done. And I'm like, fuck, what's going on? Like, so I was like, okay, when we talk, we have to kind of get to the bottom of this.
So the gist of it is the album itself, the stereo version, has been done for a long time. And now the Atmos version, to materialize, to get the opportunity to actually do that for real, it was just very difficult and took a long time to make the right connections. And despite what people may think, when you put out an album like this, like, I'm not a rich man. I can't just go, hey, I want to mix in Dolby Atmos. Please, Smithers, get me, a 10,000 euro mixing setup. Make it happen. Like, that's not how it works. So it's a difficult journey to get there. And I got there, and through the help of some amazing people. And now I'm doing it finally. And it took a long time. And we basically started mixing the Atmos version 2 months ago. But I also still have to work around my mixing partner Eric's on this Atmos thing. He's my mixing partner, and around his schedule and when his studio ability is. So we have, at best, sometimes we have one session a week, and we've basically set out to do under these conditions. We still set out to do the most immersive album we can do. And to honestly, I know this sounds extremely arrogant, but we listened to everything that's been released in the genre in that format before, and we were looking at each other and we're like, this sucks, let's make it better. And we are doing that. And I know some people don't like when you talk like that, but that's what it is. Sometimes you just have to make an assessment. You say, hey, do you think we can do this? Yeah, then let's do it. And then it turns out to be a shit ton of work, and you don't even know what kind of limitations you run into. Like, for example, the fact that we want to, or I wanted to move from the wall of sound to something bigger. And then Eric basically coined the term, let's make it a room of sound. So for the guitars that are a wall of sound that we all strive for in metal, now to be a room of sound, we tried a bunch of different stuff. And despite having hundreds of guitar tracks, it just didn't work until I committed to re-recording the album and having 4 rhythm guitar tracks for everything. And then we got the room of sound. And so what I'm saying is that it's commitment, and then commitment to quality and to deliver the highest possible thing. And then you just have to run with all the things that turn out to be necessary for that as much as possible. And then at some point you have to let it go, and we're not at that point yet. But yeah, it's scheduled to come out about 2 weeks after the stereo version, so mid-May is going to be the Atmos version.
Awesome. I'm actually quite interested in this because I've been hearing so much about the technology, and I actually didn't know that there was studios in India that kind of do it. But that's primarily, I think, in the film space.
Mhm.
So yeah, tell me about, I mean, like in terms of, since you said it's going to be out 2 weeks later, right, from the stereo
Mhm.
version, how would anyone kind of be able to get access to it? And how would you think would be the best way for them to at least noticeably tell the difference between the stereo and the Dolby Atmos version?
Right. So the availability is going to be super easy. You only have to go on Apple Music, and then there's going to be an option when you are on the Changeling Apple Music profile. There's going to be an option for the spatial audio version. And then you click on that, and then you will hear the spatial audio version. So that's the easy part. If you want to go deeper in that, you could also say, well, it's very unlikely that there's going to be a physical version that you can buy for Dolby Atmos because the files are huge. So to give you an example, the Atmos file for Abyss is 5.5 gigabytes. So imagine the file size of a song like Anathema, which is 17 minutes long.
Nuts.
Right? So that's why there's no physical formats for that except for Blu-ray, and Blu-ray is dying anyway. So I don't want to rule it out because maybe there's some way we can do a Blu-ray, but it's like very unlikely. So streaming, spatial audio version, you're all set. Now, here comes the difficult part, because that's what people, to kind of put this in a nutshell, what people often have trouble understanding who are new to this world, and what took me a little bit to understand myself, was that Atmos is the first format ever created that is a surround sound format, if you want to call it that. So it's more than stereo. It fills the room, and it fills the room even more than before because now we have sound coming from the ceiling. And so we can create like a 360-degree sound space. And we can move things freely in the room, which is amazing. So it's amazing, and it's also crazy to think that this technology has now enabled us to make this 360-degree space music where we have things flying around, and to put it in the file, and then the technology itself takes care of the fact that you or I could just put on headphones and little tiny earphones like iPods and listen to the same thing and still get the music. So it translates automatically the source material to the different listening environments. So that's amazing. So that was one of the first
Wow.
things I noticed about Atmos that blew my mind, because that was never the case before.
Yeah, yeah.
You remember how I mean, we're both old enough to probably remember how even back in the 90s, people were like, oh man, 5.1,
Yeah.
and then 5.1 came and went, and then it was 7.1 and
Yeah,
so on.
exactly, right.
Right. And then, it's just another format, because it was just that thing. You had to mix for that thing, and then you had to have a special setup for that thing and pay for that thing. And then that thing wasn't cool anymore because there was a new thing. So Atmos for the first time, or spatial audio for the first time, is a new way where we can upgrade or downgrade depending on what we have available, on what each person has available. So that's awesome. Okay, so now hard stop, because here is where it gets complicated. The problem is, though, that just physically, logically, there is no way in this universe that you can have the same result that you have with 13, 14, 17 speakers in a room with two tiny pieces
Yeah.
of earphones. It is impossible. So you have to. It's awesome that we have this opportunity for people to listen to the Atmos version on headphones. But I want to say to everybody, don't do it. So that's where it gets tricky, because um, even though this opportunity exists, we haven't found a way, the industry hasn't found a way to actually translate that amazing experience that you can have in a room full of sound to just having headphones. And that's where a lot of people are getting disappointed in the format. And I think that's been happening across the board, that they're seeing this advertisement of, wow, I can have, surround sound on my headphones. And then they try it and like, no, that's actually not better than before, because it's physically impossible. But you know how marketing works, right? So what we have to do, we have to wait until technology actually catches up on that, and we can somehow, I don't know how, but people will figure it out eventually, how that big speaker setup can actually work on headphones. For now, it's like if you have access to a 5.1 setup, a 7.1 setup, to a cinema, to like a hi-fi studio where you can go in and say, hey, can I play my favorite music? Any of these actual surround sound scenarios, if you can listen to Changeling on that when it comes out, you will get an experience, and you will get an experience that is, I don't want to hype up my own product, but it's like, it's really fucking cool. Because there's, the thing about, here's the other thing about Atmos that really blew my mind when I first encountered it. In heavy metal especially, we are trying to cram so much sound, so many things into these tiny 2 speakers. And everybody who's a mixing engineer and mastering engineer who works in metal will tell you that it's the most difficult music to mix, because you have to, like, everything is too big for these speakers. Like having distorted guitars, and then you have maybe 10 different guitar tracks, all distorted, and you have super loud drums and all this compression and this volume, and then, you have guttural vocals, and then people put a whole orchestra on top of that, and synthesizers, and, Changeling at its most complex, with the song Abdication, has 450 tracks of audio. And I'm not the only person doing that. Lots of people are going bigger and bigger because it's exciting and it's cool. But then the problem is, if you still have just 2 speakers, how are you going to put all this sound into 2 stereo speakers? So the solution has been for decades now to compress everything to death, and then make everything smaller and smaller. Like the dynamic range gets smaller, the frequency response gets smaller, then you have tiny drums and tiny guitars and tiny this and tiny that to make up a big sound, in a nutshell. Now, Atmos completely circumvents that, because if you have 17 speakers, for example, around you, and you can say, well, my big fat guitar only lives in that speaker over there, and the bass is just living there, and the orchestra is just living above. You don't have to make these concessions, and that's amazing to me. That as a person who like produces, writes, and mixes and performs music every day, that's the most exciting thing in a long time, because we don't have to make these concessions anymore, and we don't have to write thinking, oh, how am I going to fit this in the mix. Now we can just do it, and we can think about, where do I want it? And it's amazing. And yeah, so I hope that kind of explains it, and it doesn't create more questions than answers.
No, I mean, it very strangely, while you were explaining all of this, right, especially the technology bit, I was thinking of what we discussed slightly earlier about legacy, right? Because you're not creating this album for 2025. You're creating it so that at some point technology in, I don't know, 2030 will catch up, and people can still experience what you created now, right? So that's, I think, a very beautiful thing in a way. But also,
maybe you're also giving me too much credit, because I'm just trying to hold on by the seat of my pants.
No, but I'm going back to this, right? Because the way you're describing music is not just by the constraints, right? You're also kind of pushing and trying to figure out what's next. I mean, I certainly know far more about Dolby Atmos in the last, say, 10 minutes than most people have tried to explain. And I know exactly what you're talking
Awesome.
because, like, you have so many people, and I'm sure everyone who's tuned in also is kind of getting a better understanding of why, when they put on their AirPods or whatever fancy headphones, why the music doesn't really sound because it's, again, not recorded. I mean, uh, again, I'm dating how old I am, but do you remember those initial CDs that we bought, right? It came on the back saying that this was recorded on analog, which was just transferred onto digital. That's why it sounded a certain way. And
Yeah.
those old enough to remember cassettes know what a cassette sounded like. There was a hiss, there was that whole thing. And the first time I remember listening to a CD, the same album that I've been listening to on a cassette, I'm like, fuck, that sounds different, right? And it was very noticeable. And I think that's again what's happening with technology like streaming, and it's so much more. But
Yeah, I
yeah,
think you're right.
exciting times ahead. And yeah, since you're still on it, I'm definitely very interested to see how it all turns out and what it's like, especially now that I've got at least a reference of what it sounds in stereo.
Yeah. And you asked me earlier, like about how it feels to, now that the album is out, or not the album's out, that the album is done and everything is behind me. We're gonna have a listening session in Berlin in a very cool Atmos space,
Nice.
presenting the album in full in Atmos and to a bunch of people in probably in May. And if I'm going to sit in that room hearing people and watching people have this reaction to hearing the album in Atmos, and I can look at them and sit back and like, now it's done. That's going to be the moment when it's out in Atmos and we have this release listening session, and I can see people's face change when they hear how it is in the big room. That's when I'm going to be like, okay, my work is done now. Now I can chill for a bit.
And finally get some sleep, huh?
Oh yeah, yeah, that's been rough. But I've been working towards this thing, and sometimes you just have to put in some extra hours to get there.
Yeah, I mean, like, there's a saying,
Yeah.
right? No rest for the wicked.
Yeah, sure. And it's also you have to have a little bit of a thick skin, because if you try to do something that is a little bit different or hasn't been done quite the same way before, or you're working with a new technology, there's going to be so much naysaying along the way.
Yeah.
Just last night I had a weak moment, and I responded to a YouTube comment where somebody was like, "Yeah, this cool piece of music, but the drum sound is shit," or something. And it's like, how do you even begin to explain to people that you're trying to play a long game where you are not only trying to craft something that's not part of a trend or current sound and just stands for itself, but also you're working with this technology in mind where you can't have all these layers of compression on the master bus that people have been using in metal for the past 10 years. No, and you have to find different ways to make it work. And then only when you hear it in Atmos, it's going to make 100% sense. And now it needs to be good enough at 90%. And just that you have a different expectation doesn't mean, that it's bad. It's just a new way of doing this. And like, how do you communicate that? Like, you can't. And it's a head scratcher, because you want this to be clear, but you also have to be okay with the fact that people won't get it until a certain point, and maybe they will never get it, and that's okay also, because it's just an album. So it's tough to be in that position for a little bit. It's also really exciting, but you know what I mean. It's like you have to be okay with the fact that you can't please everybody for to begin with, and then on top of that, you're trying to do something a little bit unique, and that comes with a unique set of challenges, and you just have to trust in that you've made the right calls, and maybe you find out in 10 years that those were all shit ideas and nobody cares. But maybe it also works, and you're working for that possibility rather than the other one. So
I mean, I have to make the reference because we did it last time. Remember all those
yeah,
people who bought super audio CDs? I wonder what they're doing with it.
they make great gifts, I guess. Hey, here's this shiny object for your, I don't know, silver wedding. I
Hang
still
on.
have a few of those.
Wow. Now that we're done with all the tech nerds and all of that stuff, so I hope that's interesting enough for everyone who's tuned in so far. Now I think we move on to the next part of the entire discussion, which is, in terms of promotion of the album, right? But before I do that, I have a surprise of sorts for you. So let me cue up this.
Hey, hello Tom. Hope you have been doing great. Feels surreal to think about the time when you played your stuff from Changeling in Kolkata, India, and now we are here on the album release. Hope to see a full lineup back in India soon. Fingers crossed. Signing off, this is Shamik from our Marshall.
Nice, my man.
Yeah. So,
Awesome. Thank you. Shout out to Shamik.
yeah. And, Shaumik is someone who, again, I've been in touch for a while here in India. I actually first interacted with him when I did an interview with him via email for his band War Marshal. So, yeah, since Shaumik mentioned you performing in India, we actually spoke a year and a half ago, and I'm sure, like, even though so much has happened in the last year and a half, what was that experience like? I mean, if I remember well, and since he said that, you actually performed some of the material live for the first time. What was that, putting it out finally there, and especially playing it in an audience like India, of all places?
Oh man, where to even start? That whole trip was amazing, and very challenging on many levels. Um, yeah, I wouldn't miss those memories for the world. And I had a great time. It was very stressful. It was very formative. I think on that trip, I can honestly say I came into my own as a stage performer for the first time. I know sounds crazy because I've been doing this for such a long time, right? But I've always had the opportunity to hide inside of a band. And then suddenly I'm in India, I'm playing all this music, it's crazy difficult music to perform for the first time. I'm playing fretless guitar, and I'm playing fretless guitar in India in like sometimes tiny clubs with weird buggy sound systems, and I'm figuring all of this out, and it's just me. And I have to entertain people, I have to talk to people, and I have a method where I can get into a conversation. I can talk to you as if we're in the room, and it's awesome. But as soon as you point a camera at me and it's just me and the camera, I collapse, and my hands shake, and I have anxiety. And now I'm in India and it's just me. I have nowhere to hide, and I'm playing this difficult music, and everybody's looking at me like and pointing their phone, and it was a moment of leveling up, I can tell you that. And then on top of it, somehow I managed to go for, at that point, 39 years of my life without having one of the quintessential experiences of being a musician, which is you're on tour somewhere and your girlfriend breaks up via text. And then that happened when I was in
Holy
India.
shit.
Yeah. So, man, that India trip was something. But luckily, I had Abbas, who was just going out of his way to make this awesome and memorable. And yeah, I wouldn't miss those memories for the world, and I am dying to come back. So, if anybody hears this who's also promoter and wants to have me and wants to put something together, like, let's fucking do it. Obviously, I would want to bring people I would come alone again if I have to, but I also would obviously even more love to bring a band lineup and to perform all this new music. That would be amazing.
Yeah, I mean, you know, I'm not a huge believer in manifestation and stuff like that, but
Oh, I am.
let's fucking do it, man. I mean, you said it, so let's fucking do it. Whoever is tuned into this and who may even listen to this whenever they do. But since you kind of talked about the band, right? And I think what's different again now with Changeling is the fact that you've got like core members. Uh, I saw you have an album release show. Is that the listening party that you were talking, or do you have like a performance planned for the album release?
Yeah, that's a live performance. That is not the listening session.
Okay.
Yeah, the opportunity arose to play, and I just took it. And it just happened to be on the night before the album comes out. So we're like, well, fuck it, let's make it a record release party. So right now, I'm at this difficult point because I haven't been a solo live performing artist for a long time. Before India, I had never performed as a solo artist. I had given master classes and talks, but never and then it was me headlining and going through this catalog of music going back 20 years, right? Crazy. So now, after this experience, what I've done last year was to put together a live trio with two awesome musicians that are in the area roughly, so we can respond to things like that. We'll just call it the Fountainhead trio at this point. So it's me playing all this music with an awesome bass player and an awesome drummer. And that's what we are doing to respond to gigs like that. Because the reality is I would love to make this a whole thing and have Flo and have Aaron, and it would be amazing, but since Changeling is not a local band and Aaron is in the UK, Florian is in the Netherlands, Mike obviously is in the States. This is not gonna be easy, and I still want to do it. We want to do it, but it's gonna take a little bit of waiting and extra effort and the right person and a booking agency to make that happen. Until that happens, I'm not willing to just sit still. So I'm also going to play shows, and we're going to play Changeling material, and I'm going to do it in the best possible way and give people a good time. But yeah, for now, it can't be the album lineup, unfortunately.
Okay. I mean, that's one of the things I feel, at least with Europe, accessibility. But again, like you said, you have a member in the UK and the US, and that just is a whole different ball game altogether, right? I mean, I can't even imagine.
Totally. I mean, when I was in Amok Symphony with Vishal, how many times did we talk about possibly bringing this to the stage, and it never happened. It's just logistically so much harder. And then since that time, it hasn't become easier financially and economically. I was even 2 years ago or 2.5 years ago when I was playing with this band called Belfigor. So they're a big band. They're a big fucking band. And there were shows being canceled because economically it just didn't make ends meet. So you can do the math on what that means for me as a solo artist, doing not the numbers for sure of a band that's been around for 30 years and has like an established fan base, and so it's difficult.
Yeah. I mean, I hate to kind of end on this note, but that is the somber reality I feel of just like metal. But
it's not only metal, but yeah.
Yeah, of course, totally. I mean, like, unless I feel like you're Coldplay, who fucking sold out 6 shows here in India, which was absolutely another thing altogether. Like, I had no idea that they were this big in India, right? but or a Taylor Swift, I don't know. Those are different numbers altogether. But on a different note, right? What more can everyone tuned in so far kind of look forward to from Changeling? I mean, like the fact that you said you worked and finished off all this material over a year ago. What's next? I mean, because it's only getting bigger and badder, I don't know, heavier. What are you going to say? What's next?
Well, right now I'm very in the weeds of doing all this other stuff that people usually don't see as being as worthy of their attention as the album is. Obviously, I get that, but like right now it's finishing the tablature book because there's not a notation book that's going to come out of the album. They're, finishing the last big video for the last single, which I'm also involved in, creatively, and then recording playthroughs, all these other auxiliary stuff that people go, oh yeah, nice, cool, click, or just moving on. But that's months and months of work, right? And so then we're also going to have an independent merch store very soon opening, so people can get their merch directly from us, and additional t-shirt designs and additional merch. So I've been sleeping on that aspect of being a musician for a long time. So this is going to be the next thing. So it's all this stuff, right? And so there's very little concern right now for anything beyond that. But what I can say is that I am very optimistic and a little bit inspired already to continue on this trajectory. And I think that's what you wanted to get to. Like, is there going to be another Changeling? And well, I signed for more than one, so there's that. And also, I'm in this weird position that I've been doing albums for a long time, but for some curious reason, I haven't really had that challenge in front of me of following up and like a successful album. It just never happened. Just moved on or did other things. And even with reverse engineering, following up Fear is the Enemy, I never felt that kind of pressure. It was just cool. I have different and cool music now. Let's make it work. So now I think that's a really cool next challenge to say, okay, if this album does well, and I really hope it does, then how do we follow it up? And how do I write more music like this? But this time I'm not writing the music and then find the people for it. But this time I want to write for the people specifically. And I think that's going to be already the next thing that's going to kick off a bunch of ideas and cool stuff.
Awesome. So lots to look forward to. And yeah, like I mentioned, I think we should definitely do a far more technical chat on the Dolby Atmos once that's out. Because then we can actually have people go back and refer to some of the songs and things like that. But
Yeah,
for everyone
please.
who's stuck around till this point of the episode, any final words?
That's always a difficult one. Like, the final words would be, I really hope that people give this album the chance to grow on them and not, zap in, be like, I don't know, and move on, because this is an album with lots and lots and lots of things to discover, and it's made for repeated listening and discovering things. So I really hope that anybody who's like remotely interested in what I do gives this album a chance, and that I think at this point in time, that's my biggest hope, and that's gonna, whether that happens or not, will determine the next few years of my life probably. So I hope that turns out well, and that's my final words for that. And obviously, thank you for having this conversation again. Always a tremendous pleasure to talk, and I hope maybe this time it's sooner than later until we meet again.
For sure, man. Totally. And that was Tom, all about Changeling. If you enjoyed the music that you heard, support him. Pick up a digital or physical copy of the album. He's also got some great designed merch. Link to all in the show notes. Stay tuned for my next chat with him, maybe very soon. To find out when that happens, follow me on Instagram or any social media platform. Just search Trendcrusher. That's all for me. I'll see you all very soon. Cheers.